You're listening to the Grind Line Podcast.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of the Grind Line Podcast. You're listening to episode 306. I'm your host, Greg. I am here tonight with Ryan. The Detroit Red Wings continue to stay hot. We have some World Juniors headlines. We have some questions from listeners. We will get to all of that tonight in our first episode of the week. But Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm good. I am overloaded with technology at the moment. Got a new computer, gaming computer, because for some reason I'm stupid and wanted to go this route, but it's amazing. And I'm having way too much fun and learning about things I never would have learned about before. And I'm nerding out. I love it.
Happy New Year. Welcome to the year 2025, Ryan.
You know, I've heard about the computer life, if you will.
I've also heard about the computer.
And I have an active moving background right now. It's just Batman staring at the bat signal, and I love it.
You're just amazed by 21st century technology, right?
Yeah, it's pretty impressive because it blows
pretty
my
cool.
laptop away that I'm usually on right now, and I'm not upset.
Well, the Red Wings are also impressing us this past week, winning their fourth game in a row under Todd McLellan, bringing his record to 4-1. And we ended the last episode. We won't talk about it a ton tonight because if you go back and listen to last week's episode, it was at the end of our episode where Columbus had fallen to the Detroit Red Wings on a beautiful Jonathan Berggren goal with like 35 seconds left. It was so absolutely gorgeous. That was another game where the Red Wings battled back. Your top performers, Alex DeBrincat, Patrick Kane, Simon Edvinsson, Dylan Larkin, Jeff Petrie, Andrew Kopp, Jonathan Berggren, Lucas Raymond, everyone kind of chipped in. And what I've noticed recently about these contribution charts are most of the players now have a lot of lines in the positive and not so many lines in the negative, as where previously a lot of them skewed negative with few positive. So most of them are above zero in all individual offensive and defensive and team offensive and defensive stats, which is beautiful. That game, your scorers were Alex DeBrincat, Patrick Kane, Dylan Larkin, Jonathan Berggren, Eric Gustafsson. And your assists were 2 for Cat, Kane, Larkin, Schrott, Kopp, Hull, Mott, and Seider. And overall, I thought it was a good game. There was a lot of battle in that game. It was a game where you picked up 2 huge points to move you that much closer to Ottawa for that wild card spot. And I think maybe Pittsburgh has that wild card spot, but you moved 2 points closer. You're closing the gap, and it felt that was a really good win, and it felt really good to end the episode that way.
Oh, it felt fantastic. Columbus was one of the better teams at home, and I think we kind of talked about that as the game was going on. It kind of turned into a bit of a blur. But what was important is, like you said, they're clawing their way back in, and to me, conversations I've had on the side, they finally look like the team we expected them to play like. With obviously going 4-1 since McLellan took over, really arguably 4-0. It's hard to count the first one, even though on the stat sheet, obviously it counts as a loss of him being in charge. But he had barely a practice, barely any time with them. And really since that, even in the Toronto game, and we talked about this, that you could see a little bit of a difference in how he was starting to roll with it. And since that point, we've seen first line Joe Veleno. We've seen Mo and Ed broken up. We've seen a lot of different little combinations, but it feels like the way that he's moved guys around, for one, they're playing seemingly harder. For two, the guys that you're usually getting pissed off about, not trying to throw them under the bus and don't want to get yelled at, but like a Petrie, a Schrott, a Gustafsson. I'm calling them out specifically on the back end because that's where we've been hurting the most. And really, him and Yanni have kind of brought the best out of them, it seems like, in a way. I get it. We're in the honeymoon phase. We're going to touch on that probably several times in the next couple of weeks, but they're playing with a level of intensity that was just not there. And it's been refreshing.
Yeah, I agree. It's that, and I think Patrick Kane talked about it too today, where he was asked like, so what's different? He's like, it's more compete. We're out there where it's more energy. We like brought life. Dylan Larkin was asked, like it said, they brought life back to the team. And he was asked again after the game against the Jets. They were on Hockey Night in Canada, and he got the Hockey Night in Canada towel, which I didn't know it was a thing because I don't get what Hockey Night in Canada is on. But they're talking about it like, what's different about this team? Like, you guys are bouncing back. You're doing really well. What's different? And Larkin keeps mentioning it, but he's like, well, we had the coaching change. And it seems like he brings it up every chance that he gets, which leads me to believe that Larkin really was not a huge fan of Lalone especially after how they started this season, because he keeps bringing that up and he keeps bringing up how the change had led to more energy, had led to guys being able to go out there and he said, we're now able to go out and play our game, which means that they're more free to take chances, to do the things they're better at and play to their strengths rather than being locked into a lockdown system.
Yeah, it's almost getting damning at this point with some of the comments and how, like, even Burgers, we were talking about him last week, I think it was. He's finally feeling like he's tapping untapped or hitting untapped potential. And really what we had talked about and what I have been excited about really since Burgers came and hit Grand Rapids is that we knew that he could be a Zetterberg light. Maybe that was a high level bar that I threw on him on my own, but we're seeing he's had what, a 2-minute increase per game since McClellan came on. And I know one of the questions we're going to touch on is that seemingly has impacted guys like Michael Rasmussen. A guy like Burgers, you're getting him 2 to 3 extra minutes a game. Now you're starting to see that impact. Now, yes, he's had a few, you could call it lucky chances where, like the goal against Columbus, for instance, he was the quote unquote odd man out and in the box for the penalty. But
You lost the sneeze.
I did. I had to sneeze and it went away. But he took advantage of the situation, and I think that's something we've all been hoping for a long time. And we were talking to BKC the other day, and he knows, he's like, dude, the guy scored what, 3 goals last year in the playoffs to help them win a game. Like it's there. It just hasn't awoken. Awoken.
Woke up.
There you go.
Hasn't
That works
been
too.
awakened.
We'll go with that word. But it's seeing guys like that succeed. That's what you need, because there's that depth piece that we were hoping for when we saw the changes made in the offseason of who was lost versus who was coming in. We were hoping Burgers was going to step up, give us 15 to 20 goals to replace a guy like Fabry. It's doable in my opinion. Now, can he just maintain it?
Yeah, and you mentioned Michael Rasmussen, and that is a question that we got. Privateer454 over on Twitter asked, Rasmussen's time on ice has dropped since the coaching change by about 3 minutes per game. Biggest hit is 5v5 time on ice. New staff not as high on the offensive ceiling as the previous staff. And looking at it, he's right. I mean, if you look at game 34, which was the Toronto game, the first game that McClellan was here, he had 13 minutes and 37 seconds of ice time. The following game against Washington dropped to 10:36, then 10:56, then 11:12, then 11:32. So it's going back up a little bit more. But again, I think this is just, I wouldn't say not as high on the offensive ceiling. It's just trying to see what works. They found something that works, so they're sticking with it. There's no reason to mess up a system that is currently winning. And Michael Rasmussen could see bigger minutes, and this could change with a trade, and this could change with more line shuffling if they lose a game. I still think it's too early to say that they're not as high on him as the previous staff, because I don't think they really know 100% what they have right now in him. And Michael Rasmussen, like I said, in the first game McClellan was here, he used his size more. He was hitting people. He's been doing that pretty consistently since then, where he's going and battling on the boards. I think they still need to stick him net front and see what he can do net front in the long run. But I wouldn't say they've lost faith in him yet. But he has seen about a 3-minute decrease in ice time pretty consistently over the last 4 games.
Another guy to look at to that point really would be Marco Kasper. Like, you go back to the last game against St. Louis, 4-0 loss. Kasper saw 14 minutes ice time, Rasmussen 14:06, Rasmussen 13:59. Then you go to Pittsburgh, Kasper 10 minutes. You look at Columbus, Kasper 10 minutes and 40 seconds. Winnipeg, Kasper 9 minutes and 16 seconds. I'd almost say that we'd seen more of an impact on a guy like him, and Rasmussen isn't far behind, like you just mentioned. So they're spreading the wealth out, I would say, for one. But there's guys that I think that we were getting maybe too comfortable with seeing with extra minutes. I don't know. It's the feeling out process, but it is interesting that you look at Rasmussen and Kasper and Mott for that instance, and really that fourth line is sort of getting the cold shoulder, if you will, outside of specialty teams.
Well, if you look at the Winnipeg Jets game, your top performers were Moritz Seider, Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, Patrick Kane, Ben Sherratt, Alex DeBrincat. Ben Sherratt was one of your top performers. He was
Well, well, well.
the fifth in the top five. Your worst players were Justin Hole and Simon Edvinson during that game. Justin Hole had a personal day today and was out. And your scorers versus the Jets were Raymond, 2 for Larkin, 1 for Cat, and assists 2 for Raymond, 3 for Sider, 2 for Kane. That was a Moritz Sider clinic out there.
Dude,
And
that
he
whole
just
game.
continues to absolutely dominate. And I don't know if it's just McClellan's like, yeah, Mo, go out there and just wreck shit. Like, go out there and be the toughest player you can absolutely be. But that is what he's doing every single night. He's much more physical this season than he was last season. He's finding offense. He's becoming a very good playmaker, a good slot pass guy. And his confidence has grown exponentially. He's become one of the better defensive players in the league. And that offense we said would come is on its way. And it's just great to see Moritz Sider come out and do what he's doing, especially like, again, he's still an extremely young player and has a lot of room for growth. And Todd even said that. He's like, he's so good, but we still see things he needs to work on. There's still room for growth. And I think that's kind of scary that he's this good now. He's not 25 yet. Like he's still growing into the role, but excelling this season.
No, it's crazy. He's been here for several years already, and it feels like he's been here for 10. Like you could argue same with Larkin. But the confidence, I think, is what stands out the most. The aggressiveness, the way that he's not afraid to go after the puck, especially in the offensive zone now. I mean, we saw it with Edvinson, but now even with getting paired with Sherratt, there's an expectation almost that they know whoever Sider's partner is knows that he is going to go make a play and that they don't have to worry about maybe putting themselves in a bad spot. It doesn't happen all the time, but you can tell that he believes in his abilities now. Whereas even going back to last season, it was hit and miss when that would show up from him. And I love the way that McClellan's been talking him up, but we've also seen the growth in general from Sider and just the way that he's had to approach the media. He's had to deal with how the team was struggling throughout the season. So I think he's matured leaps and bounds in just a short few weeks with the way that he's had to take the lows, getting in front of everybody with that, versus now you could argue this is currently the high of the season. In fact, they're on a 4-game winning streak, and he's taking it in stride, figuratively and literally.
Yeah, and that Winnipeg Jets game was a huge test. I mean, that
Dude.
is, like you said, I think they had only lost like 4 home games all season. And they're an extremely hard team to play when you're the team on the road. And you went out there and you had a absolutely dominant first period. I think you held them to 5 shots that entire
I think it
period.
was 17-5 or 17-6.
And it was and you look at it and you say, this team is absolutely nothing like the team you saw in game 5, in game 6. It looked completely different. And it's really exciting because, again, if they carry that forward, your next game is against the Ottawa Senators. They're a team that is 2 points ahead of you in the race. You've got the Pittsburgh Penguins 3 points ahead of you at 41 for the second wild card, and Tampa 4 points ahead of you at 42 for the first wild card. You are right in the thick of it. And if you can go in and beat your divisional opponent and take that game in, they do have 1 game in hand on us. We've played 39, they've played 38. But if you can tie them in points, even if they have a game in hand, it's every point counts when you're playing guys in your division. And that's huge. And they just lost Bernard Docker today to what looks like a knee or some kind of leg injury during practice. So they're going to be down a guy. You need to take advantage of teams that are losing guys like that and teams that you know you can go out and you can beat, especially when their best goalie, Allmark, is out week to week now. You need to go take advantage of that.
Well, we saw how teams took advantage of that with Detroit last season. So now they have to be the ones to grab the bull by the horns and go with it. Like you said, you have to take advantage when it's put there in front of you. And right now, thankfully, this winning streak has put them back. They're almost back to 500. A win on tomorrow night puts them at 500. Huge for how this season has gone. I mean, the one thing that terrifies me is their minus 19 goal diff, but we're seeing that slowly get picked away at. And I think that's very important. A win tomorrow night puts them back at 500 on home ice, a place that usually you could rely upon them winning a game. This year, they've been awful. They're 9-10-2 at home. Not good. 8-8-2 on the road. So there's really a lot riding on this one outside of that because we're already past the Thanksgiving time frame. We know, and we've talked about before, that that is usually the bar of where you're at is likely where you're going to finish. Now, of course, what did Detroit have to do last season? Ruin that for us because they were in a playoff position at Thanksgiving last season and they finished out of the playoffs, as we all know. But now maybe they can flip the script. They can have a St. Louis Blues moment where they just go on this bender and make the playoffs. And then once you just got to get there because then that you don't know what's going to happen. And for how crazy the Atlantic or the Eastern Conference is, I should say, anything could happen. Like I said, they just beat a top Capitals team. They've played Toronto well. They've beaten Boston. Take your pick on Carolina, but a lot of these teams that are consistently showing themselves at the top of their division, they seem to play well against, and especially how they've looked right now. The thing is going to be consistency. Can they consistently do it? And I think they can.
What they need to do versus the Sens basically is the Sens looks like their offense may have dried up the past few games. Oilers, they lost 3-1. Jets, they lost 4-2. They beat the Wild 3-1, but then they lost to the Stars 4-2, lost to the Blues 4-0. I think if you can make them take dumb penalties, because they are a team that will get aggressive, and you can really piss them off and draw penalties out of
don't fall into
Sens.
their trap.
Don't let them piss you off. But
yes.
I think the Red Wings have been good at drawing penalties. So draw those penalties, take advantage of not their all-star goaltender, and take advantage of their weakness. They're down some players. So I think that is a game that is absolutely winnable. That is tomorrow at 7 o'clock. It'll be today if you're listening to it on a Tuesday. But that's a game that is I would call that a must win and a really, really easy way to get literally 2 points out of the top wild card spot, which would be absolutely fantastic from where we started 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we had, I think, close to no hope for this season. Some people were starting to talk draft lottery and how do we tank for a pick. And now we're back to, I think, optimistic that this could be a playoff team if they keep playing the way they are.
Yeah. And that's what you need because that's going to bring some life back to LCA. And I know that was talked about for quite a bit up to this point, that it's been not quite the same as last season, but I think fans were very frustrated. But now they're starting to see the potential, maybe the expectation of what we were hoping for out the gate. So you would think that tomorrow night, with how things have been with Ottawa the last couple of years, it should be a pretty good atmosphere. I'm hoping. I hope it's going to be. But they need it. And the team can thrive off that. They've got the momentum. They're playing exciting hockey. It's just write it. Let's go.
Cool. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We'll fold in some listener questions with some World Juniors talk, answer the rest of the questions. We'll wrap up with a mailbag. So give us 1 minute. Word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. From the chill of the arena to skates on ice and people hitting the boards, an NHL game is a sports experience like none other. And when you are looking for tickets, your pick should be Game Time. Game Time is the only app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. And see the great seats with Game Time picks and see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy your tickets. All-in pricing shows you your total cost up front, and you can buy tickets in seconds with just a couple taps. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% off the difference. With event cancellation policies that automatically refund your tickets and 24-hour returns guaranteed, you are protected with the Game Time app. And starting now until December 2nd, Game Time is giving us an exclusive deal on Winter Classic tickets. You can get 10% on bleacher seats and 20 to 25% on home plate area tickets. So don't miss out on one of the biggest sporting events this year at Wrigley Field. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code THPN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code THPN for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is key to winning in the playoffs, and you can score big by betting on them at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like player to score 6. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. You know we're always down for betting on teams like the Detroit Lions, who have absolutely no quit after laying the smackdown on the Minnesota Vikings this week. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ice.
And we're back. And the Red Wings kids had some really good times in the World Juniors this past week.
Understatement.
Yeah. ASP comes out with 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points. Best defenseman of the tournament, even though Team Sweden overall disappointing finish to their tournament after coming out and being pretty dominant the whole thing. They end up not medaling, which is actually kind of sad. But ASP, like I said, named best defenseman of the tournament. And that is extremely impressive. I mean, we know he's a high-end prospect. I have called him pretty consistently recently the best prospect outside of the NHL right now. I think there are other people that would back that up. He knows when to take over offensively. He was hitting people, which was impressive for a guy his size. And I think that it's really exciting to have a guy like him. And then we even had a question about it. And let me see if I can find it. I was a couple. How much did you enjoy the shootout goal from Axel Sandin-Pellikka? Silky Mitts kind of like Datsuk out there with his shootout goal. Would he get a nod in a shootout on the current Wings roster? And I don't see why not.
I mean, especially if he was on the team currently, like coming back from the World Juniors and joining Detroit, why not? I mean, the biggest thing that you take advantage of with a young player in particular, but especially a high skilled one, is the goalies don't know them. They don't have the scouting for them to know or have an idea what moves they're going to make. So absolutely, you throw ASP out there. I mean, in general, after that first one, he got kind of stagnant in the shootout, but it wasn't for a lack of trying because that goalie was standing on his head, not only for Sweden, they're playing Czechia, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for Czechia. Unreal saves and goaltending in that shootout by both sides. But I mean, he kind of put him in a blender on that first one. And I'm surprised he didn't try to go back to the well a little bit to get him going. But he settled in, the goaltender did, and really took away the speed of a lot of the Swedes to try to go around him. But overall, ASP shootout, absolutely. Put him in there.
Now, we did get another ASP question from Robert Smith at R1 Smith 1602. What are the chances ASP makes the jump over to Grand Rapids like Lucas Raymond did next year? Yzerman tends to slide on the side on the air and caution, but ASP looks good enough to slide in next year. I'm hopeful that he makes it to the Detroit roster next season. I think ASP is a guy that could probably skip the AHL. The only thing that they might question is maybe the ice size, which it looks like Simon Edvinsson was able to adapt to pretty easily. ASP is a fast skater, so I'm not sure that gapping up is going to be a big issue for him, or getting blown over is going to be a big issue for him. But I think at the end of the season, if his team doesn't go into the playoffs or make it far in the playoffs, you could see him over. He might get games with Detroit by the end of the year. I think if you're looking for a candidate that skips the AHL, you have a very strong need for a high impact second pair right defenseman. And that's what he's going to be for this team, is the high impact second pair right D. So I think that he makes, I would maybe not put money on it right now, but I would lean right now toward ASP making the roster out of camp next season.
Do we know how many teams in the SHL make the playoffs?
Not off the top of my head. No, that'd be a good question for Lars.
There's 14 teams in the SHL. They are currently in 7th. So you typing, so I'm checking out Elite Prospects right now. So they're sitting in 7th at 14, 13, 1 and 2.
The top 6 teams in the SHL qualify for playoffs.
So there's a chance if they don't make it, I'm not saying it's likely, maybe we see him in Grand Rapids come playoff time.
Which would be a gigantic boost for the Griffins.
Not only the Griffins, but guess what? You're putting him in a high intensity league and a high intensity moment of the playoffs, which we already know that he's made the playoffs, done extremely well there with Skellefteå up to this point. But for us, selfishly, if Skellefteå continues to maybe struggle a little bit and they don't make the playoffs, I would put money on him coming over and joining Grand Rapids for their playoff run.
Steve Yzerman even talked about it too. He said, he said, is he 1 year away? Is he 2 years away? Could he play next year? He's like, it's about his development.
Yeah.
We got to look at it. And that's like, Steve Yzerman doesn't tip his hand that much ever, really. But it's good for him to mention, well, maybe next year. Maybe we look at it and we say he's ready to come play. And if you've got a guy like Simon Edvinsson that could be his D partner, that's like your high-powered defense with your high-power offense on a second pair. It would be a beautiful thing to watch.
Totally. And we've been hopeful the last couple of seasons that guys were going to not necessarily make it to the SHL playoffs and make their trip early, and hoping Grand Rapids has an extended playoff run to see them make their way over. So if that happens this season, I think that speaks a lot to what we could see with him in the future. But to your point, I am hopeful he's on Detroit at the start of the season next year.
I agree. From Cassius Maximus at Cassius Maximus on Twitter, how good is this Kiiskinen kid? Jesse Kiiskinen had 6 goals, 1 assist, and 7 points. The dude has hands. He had a pretty slow start to his tournament. He kind of looked a little lazy at the beginning, wasn't really into it. Ramped up as the tournament went on. Scored an absolutely beautiful, like laser goal that Trey Augustine had absolutely zero chance of saving. But he looks like a kid. I mean, it depends on what happens. He's one of the best players in Liga right now. Could come over to Grand Rapids and probably should come over to Grand Rapids next season. We figure guys like maybe Carter Mazer graduate, maybe a Nate Danielson graduates. You're going to have to backfill. He's young. He can skate. He's got hands. And as much as people hate what happened when we got rid of Jake Wallman, this was part of that. And this was part of, I think, recognizing that you've got young defensive prospects that are going to be coming in and taking spots. You don't have as much high end or high ceiling scoring talent in the pipeline that you maybe need. And this looks like a kid that might be able to fill a role like that. And I think that's what they look at as they go, where's a guy that is being underutilized in an organization or an organization doesn't have room for? Can we get him cheap, relatively cheap? We need to move another asset kind of in line, but he looks like one that maybe has an NHL future and is showing off really well overseas and really well in the World Juniors.
And they need a power shot like that. I mean, not saying that they don't have one. I mean, you could argue that's DeBrincat, but what I like about this kid, if you're looking at his elite prospects, he's 6'1", 190. That's a good body size right winger. He uses it well. And you scroll down a little bit further, skills. What's he endorsed for? Shooting accuracy and shot power. And guess what we saw, especially on that wing-on-wing prospect crime? Both of those. So, for one, I always obsess over the fact that you get a winger that's coming as a righty. It seems like it's starting to be a little bit more of a common occurrence these days, but you can never have enough righties. So I'm always going to be a little bit biased there. But to your point, I think it would be fantastic if this is a kid that, for one, he's not under contract currently. So they've got some wiggle room there. He only turned 19 back in August, so he's still young. Just drafted in 2023 by Nashville. This one, to me, I think could be a secret high upside. And we're seeing a lot of that success come through with the prospects and what Yzerman is trying to build there. Now we just need to see that next step. We're about to see an ASP potentially in North America. Nate Danielson, Carter Mazer, those guys that we have touched on ad nauseum are almost there. And now if this type of player can work out, shit, let's go.
And then you have your gold medal winners, back-to-back gold medals for Team USA, the first time they have done this in World Junior history. For Team USA. Trey Augustine with a .917 save percentage and a .251 goals against. Max Plant with 1 goal, 2 assists, and 3 points. someone had asked about Trey Augustine. It was at Red Wings Edits. Was Trey Augustine's individual performance in the World Juniors underwhelming, or are my expectations way too high? I wouldn't say they were underwhelming. Trey played well. I mean, his teammates will all tell you that when Trey is in net, they don't really have to worry about anything. And he is one of the most, and I think we talked about it before, he's one of the calmest goalies I think I've ever seen in net. He makes very purposeful movements. He's like the polar opposite of Kosa, both very, very good. And I had said to someone on Twitter today, I think they're two sides of the same coin. That's where you have Kosa, who's like crazy athletic and all over the place and making big saves. You've got Trey, who's very poised, very technical and making big saves. And they're both really good at what they do, which is keeping the puck out of the net, but both do it in almost completely opposite styles, which is pretty wild. I wouldn't say he was underwhelming. He won gold. I mean, that's what he went out and did. I'm not sure USA had as good of a defense as they thought they had. No. And that probably brought his goals against down a bit and his save percentage down a bit. But I would say Trey, I mean, he had a solid enough performance to win gold. So I wouldn't say I expected a ton more out of Trey Augustine. And I think the more important thing right now is he's pretty dominant over at Michigan State.
I like the point you made about the defense maybe being more underwhelming than anything else, but that's a little bit to be expected with the way that USA plays. I think to the point about his individual performance maybe also being underwhelming, I could see that when it came to the pool play. He didn't seem comfortable at first to me, especially in that first game. I think he allowed several goals, and you're just like, dude, what are you doing out there? But it seemed once he settled in, especially as they made their way into the bracket, lights out. I know he had a break in between before they got into they played the first round he was in, I believe, or was it second round that they sat him for?
They sat him. They played him the last two games. They sat him before that. Yeah.
So I thought in between there, I mean, both guys played great for USA. I forget who the other one is off the top of my head, but I think he started uncomfortable and then came back to what we were expecting. And like you said, he won gold. I mean, not him specifically, but he played to the caliber that we would have expected a gold medal goalie would do at that level. And what did he do? Set the record for most wins for
He's USA the winningest U.S. goaltender in World Juniors history.
Yeah, come on. I mean, that underwhelming. I can see where the thought might be for that, but as a whole, no. I think he did exactly what he needed to do in that moment, helped his team win gold, and that was what was key.
And as an overall prospect question follow-up, our friend Brendan, he asked it on Twitter, but he's also over on Discord, at Ketzel Enon. What would it take to kill our overseas prospects contracts and drag them over to Grand Rapids? And I think the one he's talking about in particular is Dmitry Buchelnikov, who continues to be an absolute menace for Vityaz in the KHL. In 39 games played, has 12 goals, 23 assists for 35 points. And he is only 21 years old, doing that in a men's league. And just the highlights of this kid are insane. Now, what would it take to bring him over? The Philadelphia Flyers just recently did this with Michkov. Basically, Michkov had to, they're like, out of the goodness of our hearts, we're going to release Michkov from his contract. All he has to do is pay us all this money so that we release him from his contract. The teams, I don't believe, are allowed to do that. Basically, what it sounds like is that the owner needs to give the player money to buy out their contract. It's normally not a huge amount of money because the KHL contracts are rather low, especially for younger players. But I don't see why you wouldn't do it. He's a dude that has a skill set that you absolutely need, which is high power offense. And you can bring that in. You could slot him. I mean, would you rather have him playing? Now, I know right now Joe Veleno is playing up top, but would you rather have a guy like that playing up top? Would you rather put DeBrincat back on top and put him on a second line? Would you rather chuck Joe Veleno out a window and play him bottom six and reshuffle your lines again? I think it's something that would inject a lot of energy into this lineup, but most importantly, an extremely accurate, very fast shot, hits the net like crazy. Extremely creative. If you see some of the plays that he's made, he's an extremely good playmaker. I think you have another high offensive talent on your hands, and I would absolutely this offseason try to get him out of that contract.
This may be a high or crazy comparison, but reminds me of Panarin.
I think we had compared him to a little bit of Kaprizov.
Either one. But the fact that what I like the most outside of the fact that he can score a magnificent goal is he can set guys up to score the same. And I think that with the way that Detroit has been playing of late, that would just blow it out of the water. And it'd be huge. And that's what if a guy like Booch does make it over, the contract's done, boom, welcome. Let's do it. Like that could be an impact free agent signing right there. That's what you're hoping for with a Mazer, with a Danielson, with an ASP. But the biggest part about all of those things, it saves you a shit ton of money, even with the salary cap going up, to go get an established big name veteran that maybe we wouldn't have been able to get before. So there's a lot of things at play. I mean, even if he just comes over to go to Grand Rapids to start out, I don't care. Because you won't the likelihood, yes, you're correct. He probably wouldn't. If he's coming over, it's to be in the NHL. But getting him here more than anything is going to be what's important.
The silver lining here is he was working out here last summer. He was over here with the prospects, doing
really
training and everything. Yeah, I think that kind of calms the fears of he's a Russian player. He might never come over. He was over here. He seems committed. They're in contact with him. I don't think there's any issue, but Buchelnikov is absolutely a guy that I would try to bring over as soon as possible and slot him into this lineup. And then we'll end tonight with a few questions around just where the Red Wings are at right now and at what point do we make moves going forward. We have one from Jose Niles. Should Red Wings go all in at free agency for Marner/Rantanen, even if it would mean 8x15? At what point are we buyers? That is from Rich. At what point are we buyers? Playoff push, let's go. And then from Lucas Raymundo, thoughts on bringing Elias Pettersson to the Wings. Elias Pettersson, sure. If you'd have to pay an absolute boatload to get him. I don't think that is something Yzerman would be comfortable with. That ask starts with something like Lucas Raymond. They're going to ask for in return, or they're going to ask for one of Edvinsson or Sider. I think the ask there would be too ridiculous to bring in a guy like Elias Pettersson. But as far as signing someone like Marner or Rantanen to a big money contract, absolutely, you're going to have the money to do it. You can absolutely go out and do that.
You're stupid not to be quite honest.
To at least try.
With the contracts you have fallen off, you're going to have the cap space to do it. To at least, to me, if you don't go after one of them all in, it's a failure. Not saying it's a failure of an offseason, because who knows how things could play out. Obviously, you're going to have all 32 teams, to include Toronto and Colorado, trying to keep these guys around. So, but to me, Marner is the true prize in that conversation. But really, it's a coin flip. Take either one, pay him, bring him in, because you're going to need it. We've talked about it a lot. That is the type of game breaker. And you put him on Larkin and Raymond's wing, one of those guys, dude, come on.
Disgusting.
And then you think about what the power play would be like. You got to. Pettersson, if he was still going to be a UFA, I would say, yeah, you got a chance there. Now with his year 1 of 8 at $11.6 million, now you're selling off everything to go for him. And to the question on it, when are we going to be buyers? Based on the comments from Steve Yzerman, if this team continues to win, you're going to see him making trades to make the playoffs this year and try to make this team better for the long term.
Yeah, Mitch Marner is only 27. Mikko Rantanen is 28. Those are around the age groups that Steve says where we're going to start. You get guys Dylan Larkin's age or younger, and that's Dylan Larkin's age or younger. And to, like you said, when are we going to start being buyers? You've got 2 months. I mean, we'll see what happens over the next 2 months, because the trade deadline is in March. So we'll see what happens. But again, it all depends on, do we keep winning? Do we keep looking as good as we've looked? Do we lose a couple, but we still look like we have looked? I think it's about keeping up this identity, proving to Yzerman that, yeah, we want to be buyers. We want you to go out there and make moves and spend money, because we're committed to winning. And I think they had lost that at the beginning of the season, but that is what we are seeing come back around to, is the commitment to winning, the commitment to the other guys in the locker room, because that is where you see teams like Florida say they excel, because they're having fun. They're all playing for each other in the locker room. They're like a big hockey family. That's what they do, is they go out there and win. And that seems like that is what they are trying to bring back to this room. And slotting in a guy like Rantanen in the offseason, slotting in a guy like Mitch Marner is only going to carry you forward when you bring in guys like ASP, when you bring in guys like Buchelnikov, when you bring in a Mazer, you bring in a Danielson. You're building. And that's what it takes to come back and be a perennial contender and to make the playoffs year after year again, is a strong team that is built on the guys you've drafted. And when you get the chance to bring in high power free agents, you've got the money to go out there and make that kind of splash. And I think that's what they're in the middle of doing. But Ryan, I want to get your final thoughts before we sign off, because that's what we got tonight. And we'll be back later on this week.
Final thoughts are one pride, baby. Back-to-back division champs. If you're watching the YouTube, I've got the Lions on. I'm still on cloud 9 after that freaking win over Minnesota last night. Outstanding. It's
because their fans were so confident.
It felt so good. I can tell you right now, I was scared to death. I didn't know with the way that Minnesota's offense had been, with the way Detroit's defense had kind of gone back and forth. I was terrified. And then Aaron Glenn's like, nah, fuck you guys. I got it. Let's go. And so Lions, baby, get a week off, get healthy, or not fully healthy. We know they're not going to be fully healthy, but just get some guys back and let's go. Playoffs. Love it. Already around 33.
I will counter your one pride with a let's go Red Wings. Let's keep this streak going. Let's go out there and beat the Ottawa Senators, gain that more momentum going forward. You have a pretty, I don't want to say easy schedule, but you've got a lighter schedule coming up this next stretch. Make the most out of it. Grab a bunch of points while you can. Try to go up and grab that third place spot from Boston if you can go out there and take it. Don't make yourself a wild card team. Put yourself in the actual playoff position. And solidify yourself as actually a team that's going to be hard to play against going forward. But you can follow me online at Bringing the Wing. You can follow the Grindline Podcast online at Grindline Pod. I'd like to thank the Hockey Podcast Network for hosting us and spreading us around. You can find us on YouTube at Grindline Pod. Sub to us, turn on those notifications. You'll get notified every time an episode goes live. I'd like to give a shout out to Vintage Detroit, which is the only place you should get your Detroit jerseys from and worked on. And we also have a Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/the Grindline Podcast, there's a really super cheap option there. If you love the show and want to support us, it helps us keep the lights on, helps us get our subscriptions and everything that we need to pull our stats and give you guys all the information you need. But that is going to do it for us tonight. So for Ryan and his momentously giant head for like 3 seconds, I am Greg. You stay classy, Hockey Town.